Let's start with Putin's announcement of the new conditions for peace with Ukraine.
Right.
And two crucial points in this new proposal from Putin. And first of all, Ukrainians have to withdraw all troops from Donetsk, Lugansk, Kherson, and Zaporozhye regions. And
Right.
they have to just declare that they're not pursuing joining NATO. And right after that, they can have some sort of negotiation with the Russian government. And in response to this proposal coming from Putin, we had the reactions from Zelensky and his administration. They're rejecting, even Zelensky calling that these are ultimatums, and Putin just putting out ultimatums there. And the other thing would be Lloyd Austin, that he says that Putin has no right to do this. How do you see? First of all, let's talk about the peace plan of Putin. How did you find it?
Well, people need to listen to Putin. When he talks, they have a chance to make a deal. So go back to Minsk 1. Under Minsk 1, Russia was content to stay in Russia. Donetsk and Luhansk would have some measure of independence in Ukraine, but at least their language would be respected, their culture will be respected, and they would have some guarantees of security. And ditto for Minsk too. But we found out later that that was a lie by Francois Hollande of France and Angela Merkel of Germany. They admitted it was a pretext. It was a lie. They weren't intent on serious negotiations. But at that point, Russia was willing. Okay, you can keep. They weren't asking for any territory. Then starts a special military operation. Peace negotiations again start. They get to a tentative agreement. And again, it was going to basically at that point, Russia was not going to insist on keeping Donetsk and Luhansk, but they did want definite security guarantees, and they wanted Ukraine's assurance it's not going to go into NATO. George W. Bush. Oh, sorry about that. Joe Biden and Anthony Blinken and Lloyd Austin put the kibosh on that, and then sent Boris Johnson as their, errand boy to deliver the message to Zelensky. So right there, if Ukraine was ready to actually agree, and they would have kept most of Ukraine intact, and probably 400,000 Ukrainians still alive that have died since then. So now, the Putin's offer, this is a new offer. It's different. Things have changed. Now he says, hey, we're going to keep Zaporozhye, Kherson, the Kherson Oblast, Luhansk, and Donetsk. And you pull your troops out and you don't go into NATO. Notice what he didn't say a thing about Odessa. He left Odessa off the table. Something that they could negotiate, something that Ukraine could potentially still hang on to if they accepted this deal. Putin is making this offer now as a chance for the West to accept it. And if they don't, Russia's going to go farther, as they have each time. They made the offer. The West essentially rejects it. Russia takes care of its interests. So, they went from willing to basically allow Luhansk and Donetsk to stay in Ukraine, even with the March of 22 peace agreement, to say, okay, we're going to have an election now and bring them into the Russian Federation, which they did. So now they're part of the Russian Federation. So, Lloyd Austin, he can shove it where the sun doesn't shine. Who cares what Fat Man thinks? Oh, he can't do this. Well, by God, he's going to do it because, yeah, it's an ultimatum. It's called what the victor of a war gets to deliver to those who get beaten. Ukraine is getting slaughtered, beaten, and Russia's patience has come to an end. That's why you've seen this shift in rhetoric over the last 2 weeks. We talked about it a week ago Friday when I was still in St. Petersburg. That previous Monday, Vladimir Putin and then Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, made it very clear that the West is playing with fire and that their efforts to try to escalate the situation is going to lead to, more conflict and spreading of the conflict. So this was the offer. If they reject it, then the next offer will be, maybe we let you keep Kiev. Maybe. Now they're going to take Odessa. They'll probably capture Kiev. And then the decision will be, maybe it'll be something as, Zelensky, do you get to still live? Or you can go to the city of Lviv, which sits there, or Lvov, depending on how you pronounce it, which sits near the Polish border. This was, today was significant because it marks another, let's call it, turning point in this war. This war is now going to expand. It's not going to contract. And Russia is going to intensify its combat against the Ukrainians.
If Russia is going to intensify the war, how would Ukraine react to this attack, to these no escalations on the battlefield?
What can they do? They don't have more troops to throw into the matter. They don't have new weapons to deploy. One of the rumors that's out there, it's a report, unconfirmed, but that they're going to bring the F-16s that are supposedly Ukrainian pilots are going to fly. They're going to base them in Romania and then fly them in on Russian positions in Ukraine. If that happens, Russia will hit those air bases in Romania. I'm, about 95% certain that'll take place. That will destroy those planes. And that will then run the risk that will force NATO's hand. Okay, NATO, you're going to respond with Article 5. But Romania actually took the offensive action, which is how, by virtue of using these planes, which can carry nuclear armaments. And Russia's not going to wait and find out after they've launched whether or not it was a nuke. They're going to act preemptively, just as the United States would have, tried to do during the Cuban Missile Crisis in '62. So this, the escalation on this part, as when Russia intensifies the pressure, it increases the likelihood of a rapid collapse in the Ukrainian military. They're already, running on fumes. They got very, very old men serving on the front lines who are, not physically capable of doing the job. And they're losing probably double the amount of casualties they were 2 months ago, 3 months ago.
As you mentioned, in this new plan on the part of Putin, this new peace plan, he says that if they're not accepting these terms, the situation gonna change in the future. We're not gonna keep the same things, the same conditions in the future.
Hey, they keep walking away from deals that would have, they walked away from the deal that would have left Ukraine basically intact. Now they're walking away from a deal that is going to leave them, would require them to give up really five parts of Ukraine. the Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, Kherson, and then the Crimea. Okay, so the next one, they're going to give up Odessa. Russia will take Odessa. Russia will probably take Kiev.
Because they're talking that Kiev is a Russian city.
Well, not just the Russians. Okay, Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, his grandfather or great-grandfather, he says, oh, he was persecuted in Russia. And he had to escape the Russian persecution. Really? Where did he live? Kiev. Oh, I mean, Kiev has been a Russian city for years. There was no, the whole Ukraine is an artificial creation. Ukraine did not exist as a state until what, 1917, 1918, somewhere in there. And it was basically created by the Soviets. So, yeah, Russia will take. So my prediction is if this deal is not accepted, Russia will take Kiev and will take Odessa. And then what? Well, then at that point, Ukraine will have lost its industrial and agricultural base, which exists largely east of the Dnieper River.
We know that in Ukraine, Zelensky and his administration are not willing to, as they've mentioned, they're rejecting these peace plans. And in European Union, we had these new elections, and people are not happy with the policy of the European Union, the way that they're behaving toward Russia and the conflict in Ukraine. And in the United States right now, the Biden administration is not willing to do anything considering any sort of political settlement. This is the problem, Larry. Nobody's in favor of peace in the West.
Right.
And I think this is the very moment that Russia feels that they're not willing to negotiate. That's why they're putting out these new peace plan, because they want to force them.
Well, so this is coming. Russia's putting out the peace plan, which is, so today's the 14th, 16 days before they meet in Switzerland. Zelensky's trying to have their peace conference, which excludes Russia, and will, bring up their proposals. And it also comes on the heels of this agreement that was signed yesterday between Biden and Zelensky, pledging, 10 years of U.S. support. There's an agreement that's never going to come to fruition. So, Russia's putting the word out to say, hey, you got to take us into account. Here's what we want. This is our negotiating position. The difference is they've got the military force to dictate it. And the Ukraine and the United States does not. Ukraine would be well advised to take the deal. It's the best deal they could get. This is like, you're Hunter Biden. You've committed this crime. You lied about buying, on the form to buy the gun. Prosecutor comes to you and says, hey, I want you to plead guilty. You plead guilty. We're going to give you 6 months probation. Hunter Biden, screw you. I'm Hunter Biden. I'm important. Well, that's Ukraine. They were basically given a chance to, get a light sentence from Russia, keep most of their territory, not do any heavy jail time, blow it off. No, we're going to press on. Okay, keep it up. You're going to wind up with nothing, or you're going to, wind up in prison, and for a long time. So it's the same kind of thing. Russia's like the prosecutor offering the criminal a plea deal, and Ukraine is the criminal that refuses to accept the plea deal. And the full weight of the law, in this case, the full weight of Russia's military, is going to fall on them. I think the next step would be that you could see Russia taking out actually government centers in Ukraine and possibly killing, they no longer view Zelensky as a legitimate ruler. So they could bomb his house, his palace, wherever he's hanging out, take him out in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
But you got Klitschko, the mayor, he wants to be somebody. Zelensky's still scooting about, wanting to be somebody. Former President Poroshenko, he wants to get back into the mix. So, yeah, and Russia said, hey, there's still some legitimate authorities like the Rada, whoever the chairman of the Rada is, that they could talk to, or the head of the army, Sersky. So they've got people they could talk to, but they're not gonna deal with Zelensky.
The World Bank has predicted the economic growth of Russia would be 1.3. Right now, they're talking about 2.9. In more than, the economy is doing well in Russia. It's doing great. And the army is in good shape. And even politically, Russia is winning, considering the public opinion of the world. Nobody is in favor of the West and NATO and even Ukraine, considering these negotiations, these political settlements. And you see no sign coming out of Zelensky administration, because we know as time goes by, Zelensky, and let's put it Ukraine gonna lose and lose. And there is no sign that Europe would win anything out of this conflict. They're losing.
Right.
Not as much as Ukraine, but they're losing in the second place. And the part of the Biden administration, it seems that they're doing everything to hand it over to the next administration. I think they know that they're not going to win they will not win the 2024 presidential. That's why they want to hand it over to Trump or somebody, a Republican. I don't know. How do you see the motives?
No, I think, listen, the Biden administration, they think they're going to beat Trump. They're as delusional about beating Trump as they are about beating Russia. So, they're looking to escalate the conflict with Russia. I think they believe they can derive some political benefit from this, making Biden look tough or whatever. In my piece that I wrote at sonar21.com last night, I recalled the quote that Robert Gates, former CIA director and Secretary of Defense, made with respect to Biden, that on every foreign policy issue that he's ever dealt with, he's gotten it wrong. Well, he's getting it wrong again with respect to Ukraine. They're not thinking about this rationally. You got to step back and say, hey, do we have the weapons, the supplies, the logistics, the manpower, the military force to defeat Russia? With respect to Ukraine, no. The answer is absolutely no. So we need to find a way to disengage so we don't lose too much. It's very much like if you're a gambler and you're in Las Vegas or Macau in China, and you're playing poker and you're losing, there comes a time when you got to say, okay, hey, I fold my cards up and I'm going to take whatever money I have left and get out. Quit while you're, expression, quit while you're ahead. That's what Putin's not offering them a quit while you're ahead. He's saying you can quit now, you're behind, but if you don't quit now, you're going to be even further behind the next time. Our next offer is going to be dictated by your defeat. And that's what Biden and company don't recognize. We're at a really unusual time in history. on the international front, you don't just have the war in Ukraine. You've got the war between the Palestinians and the Zionists in Palestine. You've got the threat of war with Iran. And you've got the United States vowing to go to war with China. All at a time that the U.S. military is shrinking in size, that it's like 2/3 of its submarine fleet is in dry dock getting repaired. They can't go to sea. Aircraft carrier task force can't stop the Houthis. You know, a bunch of guys wearing sandals and carrying curved knives. And the United States Army is at its lowest level in years. They're now at 455,000, and they claim they're on track to make their recruiting goals, but that's only because they reduced the number of people they wanted to recruit this year. So, you know, that's like you're saying, hey, you know, we had the standard that you had to do 100 pull-ups and you couldn't do it. And so we lowered it down. Okay, we do 50 pull-ups. Oh, you can do that. Hey, met the standard. Well, okay, yeah, we changed the standard too. That's what's not being talked about. So, you know, here's the United States that is just, its military is in really a state of disarray. Not capable at all of going up against the Russians. But the problem is Biden and company believe that. Oh yeah, you know, we got the best, you know, we got the strong military. You know, he said, oh, there's no America's number one, you know how he is. You know, America's the strongest, we're the best, you know, we're not. You know, we just got to stop lying to ourselves.
What's your take on what has happened in the European Union, these new elections, that they're not happy? You know that the situation of Olaf Scholz, Macron, these people are not, even Sunak is not in a good position right now.
Correct.
What's the message coming out of these new elections in the European Union, in your opinion?
Well, it was, you know, the conservative elements won more, I think, than expected. That's number one. But it still leaves these countries very, very fractured. I mean, when they talk about the party won with 30% of the vote, and I'm going, you know, I'm not great at math, but out of 100%, 30% is a lot less than a majority. And so what you wound up with is these fractured political systems, both in the UK and France and Germany, across the board. And those fractured political systems mean that you're creating government chaos. You're not bringing any kind of unified vision. And candidly, that's where the United States is headed. That we're headed towards that sort of fractious division. And the lack of a clear, decisive winner means, you know, it'll be tough to change the policies. So I personally don't think this is going to bring about any immediate direct change in the Europe. Number one, the European Union is not doing that much for Ukraine anyway. It's the individual countries. But, you know, Europe's already starting to show signs of having second thoughts. You know, the United States president was pressuring Germany and Poland to provide Patriot missile batteries to Ukraine, and they both said no. Or the Germans said nine, and the Poles said no. But and then Hungary is saying we're not providing anything to Ukraine. Slovakia is trying to prosecute the guy that tried to sell or did give some combat aircraft to Ukraine. So NATO's starting to unravel. Turkey said, hey, you go into war with Russia, to count us out. We're not in. And oh, by the way, we got the second largest army. Good luck. So, you know, if you step back and objectively look at it, you're seeing chaos in NATO, chaos in the EU, chaos in these individual countries.
Yeah. Larry, Shoigu is talking about tactical nuclear weapons if Ukrainians attack civilian infrastructure, civilian facilities. And at the same time, we had reports in the Daily Express, they're talking about that Ukrainians have a plan to attack these civilian facilities. Do you think how dangerous is this rhetoric coming out of Kiev and responding on the part of Russians? Do you think is it getting to the point that Russia sees a response to the extent of a tactical nuclear weapon?
The rhetoric is dangerous if it's translated into action. Part of the problem the Ukrainians have is the ATACMS and the Storm Shadow, they really do have a limited range. I mean, the ATACMS supposedly about 280 kilometers. Let's call it, 300. So, you're looking at 180 miles. That's this is good distance, but that's not reaching really into the heart of Russia. So the good news is even with the Taurus, which has a range maybe up to 250 miles, the Ukrainians really don't have anything in their arsenal right now that and the location where that they can effectively target and hit some of these sensitive targets in Russia. If they do, I think Russia will be slow to go to the tactical nuke. That's a last resort for them. It's not going to be first resort. But if they're faced with a situation where the F-16s arrive and they get intelligence that those F-16s have been loaded with weapons that potentially could be nuclear weapons, then and it's at a Romanian Air Force base, yeah, under that circumstance, I can see NATO doing a first strike. I mean, the Russians doing a first strike on NATO and using a tactical nuke. But it would be, they would have to be in a situation where they believe that there was the imminent threat of nukes being used against Russia.
And the other reaction coming from Sergei Lavrov, he was talking about if the United States continues sending weapons to the Russia's enemy, they're thinking of a symmetrical response on the part of Russia. This would be huge if they go that direction. That would be huge for all the regions, especially all the continents.
Yeah. It'll be provide the insurgent groups in Iraq with weapons that could be used to hit U.S. bases in Syria, and much more effectively than what they're getting hit with now. Well, absolutely. It'll make life very difficult for the United States overseas. And the words I was reading, what you saw what Dmitry Medvedev said. Was it yesterday, day before? I mean, it was, let me see here if I can pull it up. Just stand by. Here are the new American sanctions. There will be new European ones soon. Do we need to respond to them? It seems not. Their number is already measured in tens of thousands. We have learned to live and develop with them. On the other hand, it is necessary not only to the authorities, the state, but to all of our people in general, to everyone who loves our motherland, Russia. After all, they, the U.S. and he uses their effing allies, declared war on us without rules. How to react? I already talked about this once, but it's worth repeating. Every day we must try to inflict maximum harm on those countries that have imposed these restrictions on our country and on all our citizens. Harm in everything which harm can be done. Hey, this is the former president of Russia. This guy who was president before Putin. He reflects a sentiment That's not isolated. It's actually, I think, a growing sentiment in Russia that they are becoming increasingly angry at the thought that the United States can just supply weapons to Ukraine and give them the green light to hit Russians, to kill civilians in Belgorod. It'd be one thing if Ukraine was actually attacking Russian military targets, but they're not. They're attacking civilians. Russia's going to hit back, and when they hit back, the West is going to be crying and stunned and, protesting, and too damn bad. They were warned. Putin and Lavrov have warned you. They warned you today. So, it's like, if I tell you, stay away from that dog, it bites, and you don't pay attention to me, and you go to my dog and it bites you, don't come back to me complaining about that my dog bit you. Not the dog's fault, it's your fault. I told you to stay away. Russia's telling the West to stay away. And if they don't, they're going to get bit. It's exactly what's going to happen.
You talk about Turkey. You know that Turkey, before they were talking about if NATO wants to pick a fight with Russia, they're not going to be there to fight Russia. And right now they're asking to be part of BRICS. And this is huge. This is so much crucial for NATO.
Yeah.
This is something, a fracture coming from within NATO.
Yeah. Hey, as we said, for 25 years, Turkey was trying to get into the European Union. And for 25 years, the European Union told Turkey, hey, go screw yourself. Now, BRICS, there's like 54 other countries that have joined BRICS or lined up to join BRICS, including Iran. And Turkey's recognizing, hey, this BRICS nations represent more gross domestic product than all the G7 nations combined. Hey, which one do we want to go with? The bigger one or the smaller one? So they're going to join BRICS. I would bet on it. And once they're in BRICS, then staying in NATO no longer makes sense. Why should Turkish soldiers die for a bunch of Europeans that don't think they're good enough to be in the European Union? Well, what sort of crazy world is that? So yeah, this is significant.
And in your opinion, in that symmetrical response that Sergei Lavrov was talking about, do they really considering any sort of help in Africa or even in Syria or even the conflict? You talk about Iraq. How about Syria? How about Africa? How about Taiwan? That these are much more important.
Well, look, already, Russia's already in Syria, helping the Syrian government fight ISIS and the U.S.-backed insurgency, and successfully so far. Russia's moving now into Africa, displacing the United States. With the difference is that both Russia and China, when they come into these colonial countries, these countries that have been dominated by the Western European colonial powers and by the United States, they're coming in to actually invest in infrastructure and to build things that will actually benefit the people. So the U.S. is losing influence in Africa. And with respect to Taiwan, again, it's the United States is talking about going to war, not China. China's reacting to U.S. provocations. So, I strongly suspect that China will continue to blockade. They may up to really actually impose a full blockade on Taiwan rather than go to war. I think fighting is the last thing they want to do. That's what's so sort of bizarre about rhetoric out of the West. We in Washington in particular, both Republicans and Democrats continue to refer to the Russians as empire builders, as Russians as militarily aggressive. Same thing for China. And yet, those two countries, China and Russia, suffered, I think it's close to like 70% of the casualties, the people that died in World War II, maybe 60%. So it's an enormous number. And, as a result of that, they understand the physical cost of war, which is why they've not been out actually invading other countries and engaged with all the military expeditions like the United States has over the last 60 years, from, starting, South Korea, Vietnam, Central America, and to Africa, and into the Middle East, and to Afghanistan. United States is like a drunk trying to see how many bars he can go to. We keep getting ourselves into these conflicts. So it's, China and Russia, they see the world differently. The United States is just the opposite. And, I think, China is saying, we don't need to fight to take Taiwan, but we may have to be prepared they know they've got to be prepared to fight the United States, which is one of the reasons and motives for their alliance with Russia. They're aligned with Russia. So in the event that it comes to conflict with the United States, they're going to have an ample supply of hypersonic missiles, and they may have Russian submarines and other naval craft to call upon.
It seems that in Poland, they want to make a buffer zone at the border with Belarus. And what's the reason for making this buffer zone? What's the problem between Poland and Belarus right now?
Well, I mean, they see Belarus as an extension of Russia, and given Russia's close ties with Belarus. So,
but what does it mean, making a buffer zone within their territory? And
yeah, I have no idea. You've got a border. Are you saying that the Belarusians can come across a certain distance? Or does it mean Poland's going to deploy an increased number of its military force up to that portion of the border? Oh, that's potentially possible. But, Poland's, they're caught. On the one hand, they talk tough a lot about Russia, but now when it comes to actually having to pony up to fight Russia by giving Ukraine air defense, they say, oh, no, that's for Poland. We're hanging on to that. So it's just, again, it's part of the chaos. Poland's not following a NATO strategy. Poland's following a Poland strategy.
I think, did you see Joe Biden at the D-Day with Macron? He just turned around looking at the opposite way, and everybody was turning like him. It's unbelievable. This shows how Europe is working right now. They don't have any sort of identity, any European identity. We see the same thing at G7 in Italy.
Well, I think you're talking about, so they were out there to witness a parachute jump by the Italian military. And when the guy lands, the 6 of the G7 are sitting there all applauding, and Biden, turns to his left and is looking at something and giving thumbs up and starts to wander off. And you see Giorgia Meloni, the prime minister of Italy, she's like looking at, oh my God. Yeah, she's treating him like a 3-year-old child had wandered off while you're at the zoo, chased him down, brought him back, pointed out, look over there. Oh, what's his glasses? These European leaders, they're putting on this front, like, oh, we're with Joe Biden, everything's normal. No, it's not. Stop lying. God, admit that the guy is out of his mind, that he's senile. Yeah, it's like going to visit your elderly grandfather who's, lost his marbles. But instead they keep the charade up. They pump Biden with enough drugs that he can go out and be semi-coherent with Zelensky. But again, when you watch him walking, he's walking very stiff, robot-like. It's a gait that anybody that's had an elderly parent or grandparent and that's been with dementia or Alzheimer's, that's how they move. So.
And do you think they're trying to be closer to Biden that because of their position in Europe, in the European Union? It seems that they're just ignoring everything that is happening right now in the European Union. We saw the public opinion is totally against their policy, but it doesn't seem that they would care about it. They just move. They're just caring what the United States, what the Biden administration is thinking of them.
I have no explanation for it because so back in 1990 to 93 when I was a state in the Counterterrorism Bureau, I was involved with the European Civil Aviation Conference, ECAC, and I was involved with the OSCE. And at that time, Europeans were really pretty feisty and pretty insistent on having their way and not succumbing to U.S. guidance, or they viewed us sort of as meddlers, which we were. To go from that to these, these are like slaves that they line up for Biden, like, oh, Mr. Biden, do you need your butt wiped? Oh yeah, let me do it. It's humiliating. I really don't know what's happened to Europe, but they've become this quivering mass of jello that does whatever the United States asks them to do, as if they've lost their own ability to think and act.
The British Foreign Secretary Cameron has suggested that tankers carrying Russian oil should be detained and blocked in the Italian ports.
Yeah, good idea. That's good. That's a great idea if you want to start World War III. Yeah, Russia's not going to stand for that. So, and who's going to actually seize those tankers? The British Navy can't even get it out of port. For God's sake, they got their minesweepers running into each other, aircraft carriers that are still in the docks because they don't have enough spare parts. Cameron's a buffoon. And, what's amazing is he gets treated as if he's somebody. He's got the position, so they treat him like a serious person. I think they ought to humor him like you would somebody who's a mental patient. Claims they're hearing voices. Yeah, I hear them too. Those are good voices. Now, go have your pudding.
Yeah, G7, it seems that the G7 countries have decided to send $50 billion with B as a loan to Ukraine and using the frozen Russian assets. We've heard that Putin was warning them that they would punish the Western countries if they do that. Do you think at the end of the day they would send $50 billion?
No, I don't think they're going to be able. I think some of the Europeans are going, wait a second. We the Europeans, we got to guarantee this loan, and that if Ukraine defaults, we're on the hook to pay back billions of dollars in interest. And I forget which of the Europeans said, look, we're stupid, but we're not that stupid. So with that being said, I don't think that they're going to follow through on it. I think they'll say, nah, never mind. We're not going to do that. Because what it does, they're using the stolen resources of Russia. They've stolen it from Russia. So right now they're not touching they're leaving those funds frozen in the bank, but they're saying, okay, the interest that's been earned, we're going to take that and use it. But that still establishes the principle that if the Europeans or the Americans decide they want to seize your assets, your dollar accounts, they can do it. And there's nothing you can do about it unless you want to go to war. So I think the Europeans are beginning to realize that this is backfiring and it can really hurt them. But Russia has other options. I believe, when all the sanctions were implemented, aviation sanctions against Russia, I believe there were a large number of aircraft that belonged to other countries still in Russia. And they just said, okay, we'll keep these until, they'll take. So they got assets as well that they can take and retaliate with.
Putin just mentioned two important points in his recent talk. And he said that he talked about Bucha and what has happened in Bucha. He said the provocation in Bucha was necessary for Ukraine to explain its rejection of agreement with the Russian Federation.
Right.
It's something he was never pointing out this way. This is the first time I'm hearing this type of argument on their part.
Oh yeah, no, he's exactly right. So what happened was, about March 30th, it was the Russians and Ukrainians, March 30th, 2022, the Russians and Ukrainians reached agreement on the outlines of a peace agreement. Putin then, the West has pushed this narrative, false narrative, that the Russian military bit off more than it could chew, that they didn't properly plan, and that they were stopped by Ukraine. Well, that's not what happened. There was a long tank column, an armored column that was north of Kiev. And at the time, it was reported as being either 24 miles long or 40 miles long. We never did get an accurate, but it was a long column. And well, if you got that kind of long armored column in place, it's a sit and duck. If you got functioning air assets, both fixed wing and rotary wing helicopter, because they can fly out and attack those tanks and blow them up. Well, Ukraine didn't do that, in part because they didn't have the assets. The Russians had already destroyed a bunch of them in the first 3 weeks of the war. So Putin, as a gesture of goodwill, said, okay, well, we've got a lot of details to hammer out here, but we've got an agreement in principle. So as a result of that, we're going to withdraw our forces from north of Kiev, move them back into Belarus, wherever, so that you no longer feel the threat, just to show you that we're sincere about this agreement. Well, as they were doing that, the West was plotting how to sabotage the talks. And I'm convinced it was the Brits that came up with this Bucha massacre ploy. And so they, and the Ukrainians killed some locals, and then, they tied the white armbands around their arms, which would signify that they were actually aligned with the Russians, left the bodies in the streets and claimed this is what the Russians did. The only problem was, at the time, the Russians left 2 days before those bodies showed up. And at no time after the Russians left did you have any civilians coming out claiming, oh, where's my loved one? Where's my father? Where's my son? Where's my daughter? There's none of that. It was all staged by the West. It was a covert action, information operation. but real people got killed, but they were killed by the Ukrainians and left as to be blamed on the Russians. So that's why I think Putin brings it up, just to show how duplicitous, how evil really the West has been, and that he's not going to get played.
What's going on right now in Cuba? We know that Russian warship is there, and it seems that a submarine from the United States went there as well. And I talked with Andrei Martyanov. He believes that there are 2 submarines right now in Cuba. And what's going on in Cuba, in your opinion?
Well, and I think as probably Andre said as well, this is let's call this a routine, previously scheduled visit. This was not precipitated by specific actions that the United States or Europe has taken in the war. Because the same sort of Navy flotilla showed up in Cuba a year ago, like July 7th. And prior to that, I think the last visit had been like maybe 2015, 2014, somewhere in there. But Russia's been visiting, Russia and then the former Soviet Union, been visiting Cuba. Good God, going back 64 years, 63 years, number one. All the uproar about, oh, there's a missing, we can't find the Russian submarine. What's it doing? The Russians have had submarines off the coast of the United States, both coasts, east and west, for 50 years or longer. It's not new. Sailing a U.S. submarine into Guantanamo was just a reminder that the United States is an imperial power. We've taken over another country, and we're ruling over that country without its permission. But we said it's ours, and we're going to keep it. See, we're going to sell our submarine in here. So Russia was just, by this act, in the context of the war in Ukraine, Russia is reminding the United States that, hey, if you can go meddle on our borders, we can meddle on yours. And while the ships were not equipped with nuclear weapons, they were equipped with hypersonic missiles, which could conventional warheads, which could just evade any kind of air defense the United States has and hit targets all along the East Coast.
This new security agreement that they have signed in Italy, Zelensky and Biden, what would that mean? Because it seems that the United States will not commit to use its troops to defend Ukraine. But what would come out of this security?
Nice words. Hey, we got your back. Think of all the times the United States has said, hey, to the South Vietnamese, we got your back. Stand in there, hang in there. Over history, the United States has promised to support certain people, the Hmong in Thailand or in Laos, and then we abandon them when it gets inconvenient. Same for the people that we supported in Afghanistan and Iraq, and down the list. So that's all it is. It's just another empty promise by the United States put on paper that has, some political, get some political mileage out of it. It'll look good in a campaign ad. Here's Joe Biden fighting to defend freedom. Defend freedom and democracy in a country that doesn't have freedom and democracy. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's just, I think it's a meaningless gesture. But hey, if it makes Zelensky feel good, maybe he'll use less cocaine.
But how do you see the position of Zelensky right now? How long do they need Zelensky to be in power in Ukraine, in your opinion?
Yeah. If I was a life insurance salesman, I wouldn't be selling him life insurance, okay? Because odds are I'd have to pay out sometime in the next, few months or next year. He's not taking actions that's building support. He's not, you don't see a growing number of Ukrainians going, my gosh, he's a swell guy. Gee, do I like him. It's the opposite, particularly as the press gangs go out and try to scarf men up off the street and shove them into the back of a van to take them to join the army. And within 2 or 3 days, these guys they're out on the front lines having no clue how to operate in an army, and they're just dressed up to look like a soldier. So that's taken a toll on Zelensky's popularity, because he got voted in on the promise that he was going to end the war. Oh boy, did that promise go awry. Not only did he not end the war, he's expanded it, made it, far more deadly to Ukraine and far more dangerous to Ukraine.
It seems that the day the United States decides to stop sending any sort of weapons or money to Ukraine, that would be the last day of Zelensky in power. The Ukrainians would do that for everybody.
Yes. So, they keep up this pretext of support, but I think it's going to evaporate.
The other thing in the Middle East, we've learned that Biden administration is offering a defense treaty to the Saudi Arabia in return of normalizing their relationship with Israel and just prohibiting the Chinese bases in Saudi Arabia. Why the Biden administration decided to do that? What's the importance of this defense treaty for Saudi Arabia? Do they really need a defense treaty right now?
Well, yes, they do, against the United States. I mean, if the Saudis sign on to something like this, they're morons. I mean, they really are mentally deficient. If they haven't learned anything by now, that a defense treaty with the United States, but it comes with conditions attached. Oh, you got to kiss and make up with Israel. Ugh. And they're like, do we have to kiss them on the mouth? Ugh. So, it is at a time when Israel is behaving like a genocidal maniac. The last thing that Saudi Arabia wants to do is put itself in the position of being an enabler of Israel by virtue of, so yeah, we signed up to a defense agreement with the United States. This sounds more like one of those, mafia shakedowns. The guy comes into your store. Hey, you want to sign this agreement though? It's security for your store. And the guy goes, oh no, I've already got an insurance policy and I got security cameras. The mafia guy, no, you need to sign this, because you know what? If you don't sign this, there's going to be a terrible accident here. I can see all, they'll come in and blow the place up, burn it down, beat the owner up until he signs the paper. That's how extortion works. So, but I don't think the United States is in a position to extort the Saudis at this point. And I think the U.S. credibility has been gravely damaged. And so I think the announcement about a security agreement, I think, are just a lot of wishful thinking. But we'll see. I mean, if Saudi Arabia really signs on to that, oh man, they're asking for real trouble in their country, because they've already, with the restoration of relations with Iran, there really isn't room in there for restoration of relations with Israel.
Yeah. We've learned that Hamas agreed to ceasefire the resolution adopted by UN Security Council, and which it seems that the Israeli government is not happy with this ceasefire. And what the international community can do for Gazans, for people who are now in Rafah, in your opinion?
Well, Turkey can start by cutting off the oil to Israel. And the rest of the Arab Muslim nations should immediately boycott anything having to do with Israel and making sure that no more supplies go to Israel. That's a good start. That would have an effect. With this fraudulent peace deal that the UN Security Council voted on. What a joke. Oh, it's Israel's proposal, except Israel rejects it. Bibi Netanyahu talks against it. And since it has gone into effect, they've not been out saying, oh yeah, let's get this ceasefire going. That's the last thing Israel wants. They want to kill as many Hamas people as they can. The problem is they're killing civilians, but Hamas continues to ambush them right and left. So it's Israel's facing some real challenges, particularly up north with Hezbollah. Hezbollah has basically set the north on fire, and it's clear that Israel can do a lot to stop it.
Do you think that they're trying to escalate the situation with Hezbollah to bring the United States in?
That Israel is, or Hezbollah?
Israel.
Yeah, Israel is. Yeah, they'd love to bring the United States in. But again, what's the United States going to do? Launch airstrikes? We've already seen that we're now 8 months of airstrikes in Gaza. Has that defeated Hamas? No. We had 3 years plus of airstrikes, or 4 years plus of airstrikes in Nazi Germany during World War II. Did that defeat the Germans? No. We had airstrikes in Iraq. Did that defeat Saddam and his army? No. We had airstrikes in Vietnam. Did they, so go down the list. Airstrikes don't defeat grounded armies that are dug in. And in this case, Hezbollah is underground. They're more entrenched underground in southern Lebanon than Hamas was, and they've got the added advantage that they're not trapped in a concentration camp like Hamas was. And they've got air defense systems. They've already shot down a bunch of Israeli drones, at least 3 or 4 of these major drones. And one of the Israeli combat aircraft flew into Lebanon and skedaddled because it got lit up by what was a surface-based missile.
Yeah. Just as a part of symmetrical response from Russia would be helping Houthis in the Red Sea.
Well, yeah, I mean, they could actually, yeah, absolutely. They could step up support to the Houthis. It's something they really haven't done up to this point. Give the Houthis some real missiles that would take out U.S. ships. They're killing, let's not underestimate the fact that the United States is enabling the murder of Ukrainian civilians, children, women. Russia's going to hit back. Russia's, sorry about that. My dog was going crazy. Russia's going to hit back. So worth paying attention to.
We know that the Turkish foreign minister held talks with Shoigu in Moscow. There is nothing coming out of this discussion between Turkey and Moscow. How do you see the situation right now between Russia and Moscow vis-a-vis the conflict between NATO and Russia? Do you think that behind the scene, Turkey is telling Russia that with any sort of effort on the part of NATO, they wouldn't do anything against Russia? How you can speculate on this meeting? What would be the issues that they were discussing in this meeting?
Well, right off the bat, I mean, we deal with Turkey has openly declared that if NATO does attack Russia or does go to war with Russia, that Turkey's not going to be part of that. And so I suspect that Turkey's, when talking to Shoigu, was reiterating that point. Hey, we're not going to get engaged in that way. They're probably, Shoigu is also probably talking to him in ways that they can increase cooperation between Turkey and Russia, who, they've got a history. Part of the fact that Russia has Crimea and Odessa is a result of taking it from the Turks in, the 18th century, was it? So, with the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, I could also see Russia trying to help broker growing ties between Turkey and Iran. Now, that's not necessarily Shoigu's. Well, actually, now when he formerly was defense minister, I'd say that was his portfolio. But that very well could be his new portfolio, because he's in a new position with access to Putin and can do and has some flexibility really to probably work with the foreign ministry as well as with the defense ministry. So, the goal of diplomacy is ultimately, you want to go out and make friends with other countries. You want other countries to listen to you, to talk to you, to find you influential. You sort of want to be like the Godfather. Hey, Godfather, can you go beat up this guy that punched my daughter? So you want to have that sort of relationship. Well, the United States is no longer the Godfather role. Heavens, God, we're the, we're seen as some sort of enforcer that goes around breaking people's kneecaps, and they try to avoid us. They cross the street when they see us coming. And Turkey's a case in point. They were promised, they got some promise. Remember last year when Turkey broke its promise to Russia, released the guys from the Azov battalion, all ostensibly because they were going to now get some combat aircraft from the United States. Well, that hasn't exactly worked out. And, the Turks at some point got to wake up and go, these guys aren't our friends. They don't even like us. They only show up when they need something. And whereas I think they'll find that Russia is far more friendlier, congenial country to work with. And I think they've come to that realization, which is why they say, hey, BRICS, can we join? Y'all come in and sit down.